Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Finland once again, and that of course means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the latest instalment of the Riku box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Riku Sanatsanaho, my Finnish beer mule. It's thanks to him that you guys get to enjoy the Finnish reviews here on Rampant Lion Reviews, because Finnish beer is pretty much impossible to get outside of Finland. But he's a lovely guy, very knowledgeable on his beers, and he and his friends seem to have a whole network where they send things to each other. And he always picks up some extra beers for me, I send him the cash, and he posts them to me here in Sweden, which is always great. So a massive kipis and kiitos to Riku for making these Finnish reviews possible, and I hope that you guys enjoy them as well. But for the review today, we are going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys are quite an interesting brewery. They've done quite a number of different beer styles. They've always done them pretty solidly according to Riku, and his knowledge on the Finnish beer scene is great, so I'm going to trust him on this one. But this beer is a style that is particularly close to my heart, and I always enjoy finding different examples of this style brewed across the world, and this is one of only a few examples of this style that I've had from Finland, if memory serves me correctly. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Lieto, if I've pronounced that correctly, close to Turku in the southwest of Finland, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Orava Brewery. So this particular beer is called Clayhills Wee Heavy. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and as I think you can guess from the name, this one is a Scotch ale. So yeah, my very first review from Orava Brewing, and this should be really quite interesting. As you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, because of my nationality, my first nationality, I do love a good Scotch ale, and trying examples of this beer style brewed across the world is something that I very much enjoy doing on the channel. I've tried ones from Japan, New Zealand, Australia, the US, Chile, and all across Europe, just to name a few things. So to try another Finnish one, I think should be pretty interesting. And this is a style I always love talking about on the channel, because you don't get too many of these being brewed by modern craft breweries. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about then. Our first beer from Orava Brewing in Lieto. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done, or will do I should say, from Orava Brewing, and hopefully we can do more of those in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So yeah, just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, prefecture, whatever you like in there, and if I review beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Finnish playlist along with a number of other things, and we do have a few more beers to add to that over the next little while as well, and there will definitely be more Riku boxes to take a look at too. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I will tell you a wee bit about Orava Brewing. So, Orava Brewing, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Lieto, which is close to Turku in the southwest of Finland, and this company was originally founded back in 2017 as a gypsy brewery, but the story began back in the early 2010s. So the current CEO, Santeri Saloniemi, was having a night out and tasted Stone Ruination Double IPA, and this was one of his first experiences with craft beer, and it just really got him excited. You know, this is what beer could be. It was a little bit of a light bulb moment for him. But he was in the pub with a person who'd been dreaming about brewing beers for a long time, and so the next week they got together to do their first home brew just with extracts. But after they did this one, they started doing some all-grain brewing together, and the whole thing just kind of spiraled from there. But once they became familiar with the brewing process, they began experimenting and developing recipes for different styles, all the way from sour beers up until imperial stouts. So they tested their beers by sending them to different competitions and gained a few final spots and even wins. And the spark of winning these awards actually, made them think about commercialising their products. So Santeri Saloniemi founded the company in 2017 with Jaakko Juntunen, and they decided to do a gypsy brewing model first to gain some experience of using different types of brewing equipment, and also to avoid having to make a very large investment early on. So they contacted a number of breweries around the country and sent many samples, and then finally they managed to convince the guys at Coolhead to rent their equipment out to them and let them use it. So at Coolhead they produced 5 different beers, including Orwellian Nightmare Imperial Stout, which is still produced every year to this day, so I guess this is one we'll need to try since it's one of their early ones. But the sales went very, very well, and this prompted them to invest in their own facility. So they managed to gather enough money to open the brewery in 2019, and they found a suitable location in Turku, but that location quickly turned out to be too small, and so they moved to a bigger premises in Lieto, where they're still based today. They brewed around 10,000 litres across 2021, and then between 30 and 40,000 litres in 2022, and I'm not sure how much they actually brewed this year, or will plan to brew this year in 2023. But the name Orava was chosen when Jaakko and Santeri wanted to come up with a name for their Untappd account. Apparently they share one where they taste lots of different beers. But their friend from New York actually suggested the name Orava Brewing, which translates into English as squirrel brewing, because they thought it sounded, he thought it sounded quite funny to him. And according to him, Finnish squirrels are cuter and more aerodynamic than the squirrels in New York. I think in America it's mainly grey squirrels over there, but you do get black ones in some places. But yeah, the red squirrels that we have over here in Europe are a lot nicer than those ugly grey things. We've got some of the grey ones in Scotland, of course, and they're just rats with a furry tail. But yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement. But as of May 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 90 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they will no doubt continue to increase that number over the coming years. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Orava Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. And like I say, they've done a good number of different styles, so I will need to speak to Riku about trying a few more things from these guys, particularly that Imperial Stout actually. So yeah, that's your brewery history section. Check out the links in the video description below. But let's go and have a little look at the beer itself. So as you can see, you've got some nice artwork on here. Nice tartan actually, which isn't a million miles away from my family's tartan. The Marshall Ancient tartan, although this is more green, but you've got some nice blue notes in my one as well. So yeah, this one's only got a little bit of blue. My family tartan has a lot more to it. But yeah, this is a 330ml can. I actually have no idea how much I paid Riku for this one. He did send me a spreadsheet with all the prices, but I always forget to look at it because I don't care, to be honest. I've already paid for it. But yeah, Finnish beer obviously is a little bit expensive. I think Finland is the most expensive country that uses the euro. But you can see on the side of the can here, Clayhills Wee Heavy. And then you can see the Orava Brewing symbol, the sort of squirrel thing up here. It looks a little bit like a Tim Burton squirrel actually, when I look at it, just with the hot flower on his tail. But yeah, 8.5% Scotch ale, this one. One thing I should explain about this style though is what it actually means. So as far as I'm aware, the term wee heavy was coined by the Americans when they took this style over to the US. I very rarely hear this term used actually back home in Scotland actually. As I say, that's just I might well be wrong, but I never hear this term used. But yeah, for me, the main difference between the American Scotch ales and the Scottish brewed ones is that the old school Scottish ones tend to be a little bit more toasty, a little bit more grainy in their bready characters, and also the fruity characters almost a little bit more like a dry fruity note, whereas the American ones tend to be a little bit sweeter, kind of more oily in their flavours, and the red fruits tend to be a little bit more rounded actually. But yeah, the way that goes together is quite nice. But I do like both. I have to say I like both ends of the spectrum. But when it comes to Scotch ales, what you'll often find is that these beers are rated in terms of the shilling system, and the shilling was what was used before the pound was decimalised. So essentially you have the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and 90 shilling. You do also have the 160 shilling as well. So the idea is that the more malt you have in these beers, the more alcohol you get, and thus you have to pay more tax. So essentially, you know, 90 shilling is at the top end of the spectrum, the most malt, the most booze, thus the most tax. 30 shilling is at the other end, and the 160s are quite special in that sense. They're the beast beers, and probably the best example of those, of a more traditional one, would be the 160 shilling from Tracker House Brewery. So that's, if you want to try traditional Scottish brewed Scotch ales, then anything from Tracker House is definitely worth checking out, actually. But yeah, that's a brief explanation of the Scotch ale style. But let's get this one out into the glass and see what it's all about. And what we'll do as we try this one is we'll see if we can figure out exactly whether this one is going to be more of an American style Scotch ale, or whether it's going to be more like the kind of original Scottish brewed versions of this. So we'll just pour this a little bit carefully, because the can did have a little bit of pressure to it, and obviously we don't want too much in the way ahead with this beer. So yeah, yeah, there you go. So yeah, the way that goes together does look pretty authentic, but the head is going to disappear, so let's look at this first. So you can see that this beer has poured with about just under a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of nice beigey tan head there. It does look very, very nice. You've got nice kind of medium-sized bubbles in the head, but like I say, that is fading away very, very quickly. You've just got a very thin foamy layer on the top of the beer there. Then round the edge of the glass, you've got a nice kind of thicker ring there as well. But I'll just let you have a wee look at the bubbles there with this one. It does look pretty good, I have to say. But you can see the colour of this beer. This one, what would we describe this as? A sort of dark chestnut, dark mahogany type colour. It does look pretty good, I have to say. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and you can see a little bit of a steady stream of carbonation going up toward the bottom of the head with this one. But yeah, like I say, it does look pretty good. So yeah, lovely dark sort of chestnutty colour to the beer. It looks absolutely great. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, I think it does go together really nicely. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few different things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. Any barrelation that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will also affect the colour of the beer too, but you don't often have to care about that with Scotch ales. It is more about the type of malt that you use and how long you boil the wort. And of course, the wort boil is actually quite an interesting factor when it comes to Scotch ales too. But yeah, like I say, a lovely kind of dark chestnutty colour to this one. I don't think we need to say any more about the appearance of this beer. The only other thing I would add is that I'm curious about the length of the wort boil in this one, considering the colour of it. But let's have a look and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Let's do this. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, I do suspect that this beer has had a fairly significant wort boil to it. So this is going to be interesting. It's actually, the first thing that pops out of this beer for me is that it actually has, it's got a little bit of that almost kind of herbally, fruity kind of thing, like cough syrupy fruity kind of thing that you get from Belgian Douwbils, to be honest. So yeah, this really is quite interesting from that particular perspective. Yeah. So yeah, for me, the aroma that comes out of this one is really, really nice. So yeah, the way that goes together is really interesting, actually. So that's one of the first things I would point out about this one, is it's got a more kind of candy, rock candy sugar type thing coming out of it. But yeah, that's interesting. But other than that, this is quite, you've got a lot of nice brown sugar in here, but it's quite a leathery and dry brown sugary character that comes out of this one. So your nice leathery, dry, brown sugary notes, a little bit of brown bready character in there, and then you do have a wee touch of hoppy note to this one too. I'm just hoping that the kind of rock candy sugar that you get out of this one isn't because of oxidation. I really hope there's not been a problem with that with this beer, because that'd be a terrible shame, getting all excited about the Scotch ale. But yeah, let's just break this beer down though and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer, you can absolutely smell a little bit of that kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired morning roll bread crust coming out of this one. And yeah, like I say, that goes together really, really nicely. So yeah, that forms the backbone of the beer. There's a little touch of woodiness in there, definitely some sort of crackery notes actually. This beer, for a Scotch ale, this has got quite a little bit of dryness to it, which I find quite interesting. And then above that, you've got a more kind of brown bready. You've got a little bit of an almost rye bready character to this one. You've got a little bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready character as well, but almost a wee bit of a white bready note. I have to admit, I'd be really interested to know if there's a wee bit of wheat in this beer. Oh yeah, I forget this with the... I know it's oats. It's got oats in it. Yeah, that would explain actually, because this beer, it does have a little bit of a kind of slightly dry smoothness to it. I really thought it was wheat, but oats, to use oats in a Scotch ale is very unusual. I would say that, very, very unusual. I don't know, maybe historically they might have, because oats grow pretty well in Scotland. They could well have, I honestly don't know, but yeah. To use oats in a Scotch ale, I think, is pretty unusual. Usual Scotch ales are always barley malt. So the way that goes together is really quite nice in that sense. Yeah. So for me, on top of the white bread, like I say, you can smell this kind of smoothness. I thought it was wheat in the beginning because the smoothness that it gives you was really interesting. But yeah, you can smell a little bit of that oaty character in there. But on top of all of that, you have the brown sugary elements coming out of this beer. So yeah, the way that goes together is interesting too. So the brown sugars for me are quite dry in character. It has got a little bit of roasty toastiness in there, which is good. Yeah, so like I say, you've got a nice little bit of roasty toastiness in there, which is yeah, the kind of roasty. It's not too dry and it's not too roasty. It has got a little bit more of a kind of leathery character to it, which I find quite interesting. You get a little bit of a sweet caramel in there, a little bit of toasty caramel as well, and maybe just a little hint of kind of like Werther's Original butter candy notes. But it has got a wee bit of dryness to it. This beer really is more dry than anything else. On the hoppy side of things then, for me, this beer, there is a little bit of hoppy character left. Scotch ales are, of course, not the most hoppy, the most hop-forward of styles, and a really good hop to use in these actually is Bramling's Cross from England, because it gives you the kind of lovely red fruity notes. But Northern Brewer from Germany, which is used in Doppelbocks quite often, is a good one as well. But yeah, you get a little touch of earthiness out of this beer. There's a little bit of herbal character in there too. Wee touch of floral notes, a wee touch of floral note, and a little bit of lighter grassiness too, which I find quite interesting. Yeah, really is quite an interesting beer, this one, from that perspective. So, yeah, absolutely worth commenting on in that sense. Yeah, the hoppy notes are quite nice. They just add a little bit more depth to the beer. But to round off the aroma, the fruity side of things, like I say, this beer has this sort of it reminds me of the Belgian doubles in a sense, this kind of rock candy type thing. And one of the things they do with Belgian beers, of course, is fire a bit of rock candy in them, so that's why their mouthfeel is relatively light with regard to their ABVs. So yeah, I like how that pieces together in that particular sense. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so for me, there's a little bit of a raisiny sharpness beyond that. You've got a little bit of a kind of juicy plum in there, and also a little bit of like a sharper cherry as well. But like I say, that kind of rock candy type thing that comes out of this beer is particularly interesting. Very Belgian double, like actually, or even Belgian Brewing is the other one that kind of shows this type of character. But as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I'm just very curious to see what this beer is going to be like. So yeah, let's do this. This one is the Clayhills Wee Heavy, coming in at 8.5% ABV from Orava Brewing in Lieto, just outside of Turku in Finland. Once again, big thank you to Riku for making this review possible. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, this is nice actually. I'm going to say straight off, the aroma, the aroma of this beer is quite it really has the sort of Belgian-y rock candy type thing that comes out of this one, compared to the what you get in the flavour is really quite interesting. Yeah, this is really, really nice actually. Gets a thumbs up from me. It's really, this beer is really interesting in the sense that it's a little bit drier in the beginning, but as you drink more of it, it kind of moistens up and shows you more and more of the sweet bready notes. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah. Interesting stuff, actually. So, let's just, it's quite a dry Scotch ale, this one, but it gets, like I say, it gets sweeter and sweeter, and you've got a wee bit of fruitiness. You have all the types of flavours you'd expect of this one. Let's just say that. But let's try and break the beer down a little bit and see how it plays out. So, middle third of your palate with this one then. The backbone of the beer, you've got like a nice, almost well-fired kind of bread crusty note coming out of this one, which is really good. And the thing is, it's not too it's not too dry and it's not too toasty actually. So the way that that goes together is really nice in this one too. So yeah, lovely kind of dry, toasty, brown sugary character to like bread crusty note in there. As you move further forward on that middle third of your tongue, you get a little bit of woodiness for sure. Then above that, you get this kind of like more caramelized rye bready type note as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together is good in that sense. So, yeah, the way the beer goes together in that, from that perspective is nice. So yeah, you get that kind of more caramelized sort of rye bready note out of this one, which is good. And then above that, you get a more wholemeal brown bready character. The wholemeal brown bread also has quite a little bit of sweetness and things to it as well. And yeah, it's almost got this. The flavour in this reminds me of the smell of tobacco actually. The rolling tobacco. We always used to play with that in the labs when we were studying chemistry. It's good for toxicology because of the stuff in it. But yeah, you can the brown bready, the wholemeal bready character in this one almost has this flavour that would make me think of like rolling tobacco. But above that kind of sweeter brown bready note, you have more of a, you've got a kind of leathery brown sugary note coming out of this one too. So yeah, leathery brown sugary note sitting above there, and that of course is usually an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil. You can kind of feel that this beer's had a significant wort boil because of the dryness that it has, and of course doing a longer wort boil gives you a wee bit more complexity as well. But then above the kind of leathery brown sugary layer, you've got a more oily treacle molasses, more oily caramelly note, but maybe underneath that there's a bit of toasty brown sugar as well, and in the dead centre of your palate you have a more, you definitely have a little bit more of a like treacle molasses type thing going on. So that's really interesting as well. So yeah, the other thing you'll get out of this beer is a little bit of a more kind of nutty, a little bit more of a nutty flavour actually. And the nuttiness comes out into the aftertaste. It's like a dried almond or pecan or something like that as well, which I think is really quite interesting. So yeah, that middle third of your palate then is the middle third of your palate, and this one really has most of the complexity in this beer, but I like it. It has, you know, this beer kind of has the types of flavours that you'd expect of a Scotch ale, and it's very, very difficult to place actually in terms of you know, is it American, is it more Scottish? It almost actually, it comes across as a lot more dry and yeasty in a sense, so you could almost say it's kind of like one of these Belgian brewed Scotch ales. I really don't know what it's modelled on. It could well be modelled on one of the Belgian ones, and those beers originate from when the Scottish soldiers went and fought in Belgium in the First World War actually. Was it Gordon's Wee Heavy, I think, was the well-known one. There is another one, I think, Mick Schoof or something as well. It's modelled on one of the beers anyway that's a very old kind of Scotch ale type beer brewed by one of the Belgian breweries from that time. But anyway, that covers the middle third of the palate in this beer. Let's have a little look at the back third of the palate. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, again you get a nice little bit of a bready build up in there. A little bit of rye bread, a little bit of kind of brown bread as well. So yeah, the wholemeal and brown bready characters in this one are nice in that sense, but the build up, it's quite a sweet brown bread. But then the back third of the palate, you've got all these different layers, and the layers on the back third of the palate are quite similar to the middle third. They just come out in different intensities, and as I've always said as well, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, whereas sweeter flavours come out further forward. So you can feel the bread crusty base is a lot drier and more toasty. Then you've got the kind of rye bready note in there, which is still quite dense, but a little bit more airy, and it's got a lot of kind of almost caramelised sweetness to it. Then you get the wholemeal brown bready layer, which is a lot taller and a lot more airy. And then above that, it does kind of feel as if you've almost got like a little bit of almost like a wheaty bitiness in this one. But like I say, this beer has oats in it, which I think is one of the reasons why this beer is so dry. Normally when you put oats in IPAs, of course, they give you more of they contribute to the creamy character, whereas they seem to contribute to the dryness in this beer. But above everything else on that back third of the palate, you've got a lovely kind of yeasty character coming out of this one, which is good. So for me, the yeasty notes in this beer, pardon me, it's going down the wrong way. You do get a little bit more of a kind of farmhousey wholemeal brown bread. It's like a farmhousey wholemeal rye type brown bread in this one. You've definitely got a little bit of kind of toasty caramel and honeycomb wrapped around this. I always get honeycomb in the back of the palate for some reason, but you can feel that. On the back third of the palate, the flavour is taller, then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. But that's the malty and yeasty side of this beer covered, and that's the most important thing when it comes to Scotch ales, I would say. So this is the type of flavours you're getting out of this one are what you would expect, but it just feels different, this one. But I like this beer, don't get me wrong on this. Yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things, then it's kind of what you'd expect. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of a slightly stronger earthiness, but as you move further forward, it gets a little bit more herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of floral, aromatic sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. So yeah, nice little bit of floral aromaticity there, and then round the front curve of the palate, you've got a more oily, grassy sort of thing coming out of this one, which is pretty cool too. Yeah, for me, the hoppy character in this one just adds a wee bit more depth, but of course the hops are not the most important focus of a Scotch ale. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the green component of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of kind of bready build up in this one. And again, it's a kind of brown bready note. It's got a little bit of rye bready character in the base, but more of a smooth, sweet brown bread on top. Then the base of that hoppy part of the base of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of like a dry rye bread crust, a more caramelised rye bready note on top, bit of a wholemeal brown bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the fruity, juicy esters roll the way out of the beer. Now the sort of phenolic, medicinally type note you get out of this one, you can feel that sitting on top of the bready notes in the base of the beer, but above that you get the ones that obviously come from the fruity part of the hops, if you like. So let's have a wee look at that too. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer in this sense, you've got a little bit of a kind of raisiny sharp character coming out of this one for sure. A little bit of that. Underneath you've got a juicy plum and a little bit of a drier pruny character. As you reach the middle of, you actually have a little bit of an almost cherry type note in this one as well. I always find that it's quite a lot of cherry coming out of this Scotch ale for me. But then yeah, as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you get a wee bit more. Yeah, you get a wee bit more of a kind of oily fig, and then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you're getting blackcurrant underneath and a more blackberry note on top. But like I say, the fruity nature of this beer is quite different because it has this kind of phenolic Belgian Bruin, Belgian Dubbel type quality to it. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is really quite interesting. So yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. Yeah, but I like that. I do like how that goes together for sure. Yeah, for me, really interesting stuff. It's like I say, there's a lot of. It's really difficult to say whether this is an American Scotch ale or a Scottish Scotch ale. It probably leans a bit more towards the Scottish side of things with the dryness and the longer wort boil and stuff, but I really would say that this beer is a little bit more akin to yeah, it really is a little bit more akin to a kind of Belgian Dubbel in some ways. It's not quite as strong as the quadruple, of course, but it really has quite a little bit of Belgian Dubbel type quality for me, especially that sort of phenolic-y medicinal thing it has. But the question should always be, is it a nice beer? And I would say yes in this case. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, it's kind of bottom end of full bodied, smooth carbonation, quite slick and quite oily, I would say. Good good little bit of dryness out of this one and a wee bit of bitterness as well. But yeah, slick and oily. Yeah, bottom end, yeah, top end of mid body, bottom end of full body, kind of around that spectrum. Really do like it. Lovely little bit of dryness and roastiness in there as well. The malt base has got a good little bit of sweetness from the bready character and quite a dry sweetness that comes out more the further into the aftertaste you go. A little bit of a sharper fruity character as well, which I find quite interesting. And an oily sweet notes and a wee bit of a drier phenolic fruity note too. It's a really interesting beer, this one, as I say. It's not, I don't find this one to be too authentic a Scotch ale, to be quite honest with you. I get a feeling they've put a little bit of rock candy or something like that in this one, because it really does have quite a little bit of Belgian Dubbel, Belgian Bruin type character to it. So I would be curious as to whether they've done something like that in this one. Either that, or it could be something with the yeast that's making it have this type, this kind of phenolic type quality. But like I say, an interesting beer, this one, and I'm glad I got to try it. A nice introduction to Orava Brewing in Lieto. So yeah, let's leave it there. This one was the Clayhills Wee Heavy, coming in at 8.5% ABV. Not really comparable in my mind to either an American or a Scottish Scotch ale, but a really nice beer in any case. Could be more akin to like a Belgian Scotch ale or a Belgian Dubbel or something like that. Yeah, probably more a Belgian Dubbel considering the percentage that it is. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Orava Brewing as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, check out my social media, check out Orava Brewing social media. Once again, a massive keepers and ketos to Riku for making this review possible. But I will see you guys in the next review. Sláinte, Skål, cheers, keepers and ketos. Have a go at this Finnish Scotch ale. Very, very interesting.